Hi, I'm Jeffrey O'Brien. Welcome to the spring series of the Holloway Poetry Series. I curate the series along with Alex Walton over there. We're incredibly happy to have found a way to bring our former Bay Area denizen back in Cedar Sigo, Cedar, who will be reading after Noah Warren, our own grad student here. Later in the semester, well, not much later, next week, we will have Andrea Brady here. And then in March, Aditi Machado will be here, and then we will round out in April by bringing another person back, Chris Nealon. So please come out for those as well. When the reading is over, please peruse the books, courtesy of Mose. Thank you for being here. And with that, I'm going to ask Jared Robinson to come up and introduce Noah Warren. Thank you.
Hi. Thanks to the Holloway Committee, to Alex and Jeffrey for putting this together, for the poets being here. It's really exciting. Okay. Is that better? Can you hear me? Cool. The double voice of Noah's poems is the weight of the mind in its nature. His is a poetry, quote, who works two good jobs. Each finds its answer to each, yet in them to occur as difference does not occur as, for example, an esplanade occurs. In A New Landscape, which is one of the poems, boats like dragonflies flicker up and down the bank, the man-made, analogized, entomological, holding only for a moment before the second voice surfaces. The lighting turns into act. And the speaker's ear, submerged, hears the dark water into language, quote, the black wavelets crinkling into sibilants, where again we find the doubling, crushing pressure of a desire to hold and holding. As he opens up elsewhere, quote, statement held till it melts, I'm sorry, unquote, of representations apt to experience and to be experienced. Then, after another few passing moments light and suicidal, this poem, like many of Noah's poems, turns up its hands for a moment, revealing again something cleft and two, and finally left that way. The soft, abiding tyranny of his particular medium of thought, and that vital harmony, the world, beckoning to something in each of us just beyond it. So the waves turned sibilants, quote, of assent, turn our attention as they have just taken it in, and behold, our speaker gestures above you. The leaves are leaves, full stop. First voice, our little skeptic. What was there with what it was? But his assassin's second blade is sharp. In italics, a double answers. Or is it merely a shift in perspectives, recollecting the reader to what is beautiful, even from within the bounds of language? Quote, the leaves are also rain. Full stop. Sorry, I missed it. The second voice, there we go, the optimist. What syntax allows us to show this likeness? Does it whisper or shout? In any case, this quiet exchange tucked away has a shattering-like manifesto, or what have I assented to in following the sounds of the sibilant waves upward? Noah is asking us anyway to risk it, this following, if only to find that our limited tongue and the ears that hear it in the silent visual symphony of what is out there, quote, in the complex center, the field, on the page, or in the landscape, might be cleaved from us by us indefinitely. Noah's poems work as if to reassure us that just because, quote, what views our rental owns go abstract, no matter how wakefully we attend them from our limited points of reference in, quote, a cabin in Cameo on a bright black field, the mind and the world surrounding it interact, and thus, like the poem, are one. And as Noah meets them, they are told as much. But beware, out there somewhere is the double in the dark. He wants to fold you. Please join me in welcoming Noah Warren.
Thank you, Jared, and thank you to the Holloway Committee. Wall mice. There are two piles of documents. The one on the right has to become the one on the left. there is a paperweight in the shape of a whale. Some pages have almost nothing on them, maybe 8 words floating in eggshell space. They have to be read too, so I do. I drift over them. Once I used to wear a fancy belt buckle, a cabin and cameo on a bright black field. My left thumb would circle the oval as I wrote. I miss that buckle. And I miss the dog that slept in bed with us for 6 years, always nearer to me. You curled toward the wall, me in the middle. I tried not to wake either of you when I got up at 4 to pee. You were the slope of a shoulder, the glow of heat beside me, and I could love that. The brewery smell wafts in the open window, tangled rot and freshness, also jasmine and cut grass. When someone dies, their fears disappear, and all the luster goes from their treasures just like that. The accurate watch, the binoculars, the stag-handled knife, the silver whiskey cup that great-grandfather won at the county horse race in 1902 with a quick quarter mile. Look what you've done. It's your bed, said my mother to my father, who was trying to get up off the floor, reeking of Listerine. A sharp rustling, like sycamore leaves, moving against each other. In a previous draft, I was able to imagine you rising to walk around the city at the same time I felt the need to walk, or setting down a glass of water as I picked one up. In a previous draft, I understood myself as a man who preferred to write on cocktail napkins because they'd tear if he got too invested. In that one, I kept my father apart from my loneliness. You know this. There was a time when I hung large silver gelatin photographs of glaciers on the walls of my bedroom. I was able to sleep like that. They were my father's photographs. When I was small, he'd talk for hours about the different kinds of ice, about glaciers and how they calved. I loved that. I could feel it. I felt the huge jewels falling into me. Blessing for the new year. 3 blue canvas coats, children, are returning from school. Down a sidewalk, dripping boughs overhang the princess tree, the apple, and the persimmon, whose heavy fruits are all one color, the color of its floppy orange leaves, which will hang, heavy as persimmons from the tree's jagged twigs, until a January storm takes them, or until new buds, swelling from the same soft spots in the bark as they did last year, replace what was there with what it was. This poem's called The Standard. It's set in one of those kind of horrific bougie hotels. At the Standard, they pay a man to lathe olive wood into the softball-sized spheres they load the braziers with in the heat of early afternoon. They douse them with gas, touch a match, and the guests, with their raven faces and their sky-colored suits, emerge to sip from tiny eggshell glasses. Orchids lean out from the jute baskets lashed to the palm trunks. Lit from below, they flutter like moths, undesperate. And the guests look exactly the same age. Their fingertips linger on each other's forearms as they form tender, careless sentences, which diffuse. and though even their shivers are languorous, delicious, Eugenia says you can tell from the way they dip the big shrimps in green sauce and nibble the creamy meat down an inch at a time, that they never have sex. And if I observe how they let their napkins drop on the gravel, how they drift down the path to dinner, I'll know who has just recognized herself in a stranger, calmly, whose torso is squeezed by a wordless joy, who feels like a child, who a cloud, and who aches as she steps back onto the cool tiles of the arcade in thin sandals, to be broken down again, annihilated into a thinking rubble. This poem is called Hotel. The evening sun shines along the suicide nets that billow out beneath the bridge. The bridge would catch itself if it fell. Crossing the harbor with perfect form, the cold arms of the swimmers glitter. Three-masted ships, Italians, a decaying island prison, blades of grass, people posing, wind. The slowing jogger looks like a man named Jesse, whom I knew, but didn't like, even though he was intelligent and kind. This poem is called The Pity. And I guess it's about what learning another language makes possible and what makes it possible to hide. I should mention that Asclepion is a holy site of the cult of Asclepius, the healer god. You would go there and you'd have dreams, and there was a theater. Good. The Pity. How briefly I knew Greek. And by Greek, I mean the charcoal veil I loved my longings in. I mean the made rage that made me slog back down that lizard's road, and the guard agog to Turkish porn softly heaved my pack than me over a wire wall. I cut my palm. I slunk through a tunnel. I emerged into that half-drowned theater and was cheered by a key change in the mosquito of Maynard's seethe. I'd wrestled moods and forms and rhetoric as the oak leaves fell upon Connecticut, and attacked the weight gym as snowpocalypse retreated as the dark earth fielded myriad sharp stems, worshipful, confused. I'd got tattooed across my meaty spine a doe-eyed bull with scimitarish cock. I'd watched the needle in the mirror stitch my mirrored skin like softly oozing silk. Every evening in the bath, Papa smoked and stewed. Hard water drank his ruddy dirt. Tap tap the tips sloughed gray into a faience dish. Asked, he'd dart, I was thinking about you. His goatee eyes, his walnut skull, his face. Such food I char for the dead. For abuelo I drizzle locust honey across and into a small clay cup of rum. For abuela I scratch each saint's exile, past and future, on banana leaves with an iron style. Holy are self-martyrs. For her I gnash and tear. And is it piety that inflicts me so ceaselessly polite? on the quietness of X's inboxes, and illuminates my heart with pinpricks as I watch my mother's faces fail. A thin road holds the cooling eye. At the atom's center fizzes permanent exchange. Sweating as I slept, guzzled like a wineskin, I woke to doze in that drowned Asclepion. Birds crumbled at dawn. Water snakes crept over the swamp like script. I dreamed forever. And then this penultimate poem is called The Complete Stories. It was nice when Ryan and Richie arrived on time. Then it was nice when Neil and Aaron did. They stood smiling on the threshold with their arms full of things, exceeding themselves with a very nice Magnum, an Amaro, and a round of soft cheese. But friends, it was unfortunate that Jacob and Margaret got caught, as their text said, in horrific traffic on the bridge. But the group soldiered on without them, gossiping and drinking the mojitos. Then it was nice when they arrived. Margaret, apologizing, rounded out the picture. They got a late start. They just adopted a second cat to keep Dennis company. A black kitten with cold green eyes. And they named her Tilda Swinton. At the shelter, all okay. But when they got home, she darted straight under the couch, where she'd stayed for a week. Margaret had spent hours every day with her arm under the couch, which the kitten snuggled or nibbled, just trying to calm her down. Margaret acknowledged that this didn't bode well for the cat's personality, but people encouraged her, saying, "You never know." Jacob was quiet, as he often is around Margaret and company, letting her build the public narrative of the life they'd so recently begun to share. Because the mojitos turned out stronger than expected, and because Ryan was pounding them, and Richie, maybe because he hadn't eaten enough earlier, got charmingly lit and started trotting out his anecdote about the leather grannies and someone getting fisted at the Folsom Street Fair on the sidewalk. It's likely that, walking into this, Jacob and Margaret felt alienated. But soon it was time to go into the other room. The event was the arrival, that very morning, of a new dining table, which Lucy had invested a lot of symbolic energy in. A small inheritance from her grandfather in England had permitted and encouraged her to splurge on one custom built by a couple on Etsy. And although the cherry stain was darker than in the images, it was very handsome and worked in the space. The table represented a new level of seriousness domestically. Lucy had recently turned 30. It stood in for those other, more distant stabilities and was a commitment to aesthetic pleasure in daily life. Garlicky pork shoulder, soft as butter, fresh tortillas, a spicy black bean puree, and the winter salad Jacob made, with cabbage and tiny white carrots from the market, made everyone, when they weren't chewing, coo extravagant compliments, and the French and Italian wine flowed freely. Then only Neil and Aaron remained. It was past 1, and there came a moment when Aaron tried to put a hopeful spin on how much her brother had been using over the holidays. And Neil snapped at her for deceiving herself and falling for his shit. It was tense. A minute later, Lucy tried to reconcile them. She talked about the scientific literature around addiction, about the sickness of it, and from there made a qualified parallel to how she dealt with her feelings around Adi's ALS. She was talking about how we can recognize tragedy for what it is. even while we feel compelled to repeat things we don't believe and don't comfort us. April. Who are you? Coming, smiling, in a coat of rain. I think you are the rain.
Cedar Sigo is the author of 8 books and pamphlets of poetry, including Royals from Wave in 2017, Language Arts, Wave in 2014, Stranger in Town from City Lights in 2010, and 2 editions of selected writings from Ugly Duckling Press. He lives in Lowfall, Washington after many years here in the Bay Area. Cedar Sigo's poems live at the intersection of the materials of everyday life, desire for others both close by and far away, and access to the otherworldly. In bringing these together, his poems show a connectedness to several strands of Bay Area writing. Perhaps his clearest interlocutor is Joanne Kiger, who selected interviews There You Are, Sigo edited in 2017. In the introduction of that volume, Sigo writes, "When a poet stays attuned to the possibilities of the present moment, any attempt at summing up is impossible." His own poems sing along with that attunement, sometimes following Kiger's meandering shapes as forms that capture time's uneven and various movement. I'm thinking of phrases in his poems that reflect this attention, like painted dusk, pastel grime, and streaks. This language brightens and sharpens our own experience of the world, finding frequencies of everyday life that we readers can hear and see as well. But as for Kiger, attunement to the everyday isn't only attunement to the things of this world, but to other worlds too. Quote, "All my rooms are alien," Sigo writes in the poem After Self-Help. Here I see his poems belonging to a broader Bay Area surrealist arc, including writers like Jack Spicer and Bob Kaufman, for whom poetry is both a receptive faculty to the mysterious forces of outside and a projective faculty that takes us from this world into others. In one poem, Sigo writes, "We call him the poet as he brings us the unknown, anything that possesses him." Whether in poems that look more like sonnets or in poems that sneak across the page, I find myself transported by Sigo's poems to a world where other forms of being seem possible. Quote, "A tunnel blown down past the marble to brass, and first to charge the shore waving our shields, a castle left cooling to ruin, and the islands will flower in and out." Sigo's poems make these flowering islands and castles possible in language, in the materials that we possess. And it is our own desire that leads us to them. Here I will call upon another Bay Area writer, Kevin Killian, for whom poetry offers connections to other people, to artists and writers both present and past. Have you seen that video, Kevin and Cedar, by Cecilia Doherty from 2002? It's on Vimeo if you haven't. Cedar stands behind Kevin, mouthing along as Kevin reads one of Cedar's poems. The video was apparently filmed very soon after Cedar first moved to San Francisco, and it ends with the 2 poets talking and cuddling in Kevin's bed while these words from Cedar's poem, O Phantasma, appear on the screen over them. "Should you be the one to discover me, stretch out the hand of mine closest to you, and set the rings as if I had died trying them on." In all of Cedar's poems, language projects desire to and from itself, and to and from others. In a poem from Language Arts, he writes, "Even cast-off lines have their own pull and rhyme, man at leisure ripped out of my mind, lonesome after mine own kind." Desire underwrites everything for these poems. Movement in this world, movement towards other people, movement towards another world. The pull and rhyme of Cedar's language is the movement of these movements. One of my favorite poems in Royals, called Blue Moon, ends with a series of instructions. This is a quote. Demand a larger cage, off stage, of sound in darker woods, of me and shine. Be a sweetheart, a weatherman. Be the disobedient, wavering hem, or command the words to hang back, to tip their hat, and live alone. Send several masterpieces, poems, several times a day, lying bright in the same cold box. I want to call these exhortations, but they are so soft, so welcoming. These imperatives address a reader who is also a writer, a reader who would join into the disobedient, wavering hem of language that Cedar Sigo's poems offer us. The poem commands language itself, but it commands the words to hang back, to tip their hat, and live alone. The poem models a relationship to language where to demand is to invite. The poet is a weatherman who works under blue moons, the dictates of an inhuman, extraterrestrial outside. Yet the providential circumstances for masterpieces, for poems, are not exclusive and elitist pieces of mastery. They come several times a day, if we will so invite them. Language and experience here on Earth, this same cold box, gives us these opportunities for love, for shine, for poems. Please join me in welcoming back to the Bay Area, Cedar Sigo.
Thank you for that beautiful introduction. And thank you to Noah and Alexander, and most of all to Jeffrey. I moved from the Bay Area about a year and a half ago, and I've been back once, just for social reasons. But this is the first invitation I've had to come back and read, so I really appreciate that. And I thought tonight I would read selections from Royals, which came out in 2017, the same year as the Joanne Kiger book of interviews and ephemera and journals. And then I'll read a lot of new work. This is called Green Rainbow Song. Hung up on my hearing, and deep in whose playbook, one too many nights and never a blackout. Doing the best I can, only a man, it hurts me too. Blues in the night, Verlaine blues, sitting here thinking a blues for Anne, all nerves, and mine the most dirty, unhurried, afternoon jags. A freshly penned lyric for sinking to autumnal Atlantean shade. I wish us more luck. I wish my little tiger lily, sheltered in a clear crystal box, being carried. Green pearl-handled mallets edging the Annunciation toward a new burn. The chamber of maiden thought is metered. Big fields, villagers, stars on the back lot blues. It's the smoke spot I shade softest, a curve so tight it's really blind. The chamber gives way to the word, in this case, mine. Suspended sentence. Have we addressed my Scottish accent in the middle of Baltimore? That's nicely played. Fast forward to the flashback, that wad of cash drawn right on the stencil. Genuine teenage lust plus Peter Hujar. The poem floats past us while I feign bitterness and wait. Have you not heard of induction? Forging new values with the public who seem to know it's all love and not theory, all actual withdrawal of soldiers' bodies. And I, the song, a Brice Marine. You'll see the earth smoke, I'll make no noise. I'm a poet living upstate and working as a barber. I rework old railway songs in a crooked nook, sweeping together sworn paths. I drink Patron for the prettiest little morning after bottles, pencil in the track money memorized per month. containment handed down in part from my betters and mainly, well, my old man. And this was a poem for the poet Micah Ballard, an old friend of mine. And I'm not sure why this was for him, I think, because he had a lot of like Old English overtones in his earlier work, and I stole this title from Robert Herrick. That could be it. I can't remember. But it's called The Vision. My typewriters to be melted and cast as a bell, twin water snakes strangled by their capes, waiting to go off on prepared piano. A round of French to float my bits of hugely failed Paul Verlaine blues. The hat blocked and golden rising lines. A pop song scrawled beneath the water-stained wall. I found it impossible not to dwell in the words, reading billboards between the strip. I left on the bit about relaxing enough to get the drift and hand it back erect in stitches. Bleach in the flash imprinted on the iris, emblazoned crown in full dissolve. To melt your barroom portrait or perfectly toned bust tilted into bronze, beside the assassin-ridden balconies, vacuum-mounted surround sound assassins. Bombing through any era's open inquisition, we were fathomless in beating the clock, all night within reach. The Iron Maiden, nose-guarded helmets in line, riding the most haunted wave and mirror, grown over with stars. Like stride. We will live forever misaligning the changes into further time-stinted tricks, giving up post-kickflip failures, scribbling prepared remarks to notebooks unlocked over dry spells flooded with demand. Salt crystals crushed, the past flashed, and I was a working writer, nursing the pools in everyone's hearts, disembarking, soothing the air around a final question. Away in the country, toweling off, my doing the most proper thing turned somehow slick, of feminine wiles, a claptrap casebook, the dream at the end so delicate and put out, makes light so pained, two reclining long in the turn of the neck, in like stride, in parting poetic asides, bored to tears in Taos. Cross out words and tunnel the line. The guts will sit atop, glistening. Hand-stamped valves really toying with release. A lighted display, corresponding controls. To repave an entire arcade in release of our well whiskey texting back dimension. We are poor and not cheap, in love with the same little song-slashed booklet. Have a little cold. The real contents of a street poet's suitcase. Tiny dented copper spools, an elephant gun, clean underwear, red Garland records, red in Bluesville, red alone. A pair of counterfeit Vacho Lindsay cuckoo clocks. Empty pocket rocket, Fernet. Cerulean rabbit's foot keychain. Turquoise money clip, 17 cents. Stained satin pajamas. Golden sardine with underlined lines and figures. Apollinaire never hiked in papier-mâché woods. Apollinaire never slept all night in an ice house. Side trips. I saw at my desk nightly, using only streetlight. I blow dry the basement tape for Jack to read, my drunken crash at the gates. Endless cartoon colorblind blues. The ghost of John Jacob Niles is flown to what graven rock? Shaking in his boots. He melts the ravine, drinks up the river, a sun-wasted rose color. It was only a baggage room, an attic, here where we lived before the war. That first broken window over, it shocked me with the levels of felicity and of imagination inside. Twin angels at the impasse, stripping wire out from the earth. Bolts of thunder peeled from under the falls, stones thrown from very high to form a ziggurat, an hourglass I almost forgot to intone. The blood in the iron bowl, old warehouse torched on a quiet night. Formulas opening the floodgates. Meaning my ode to Martha Diamond. Meaning a blank book for Lucy Rose. Classic, tiny, split-second poems that clung to the air beneath my gaze. I don't think I've ever written anything that's not about writing poetry. This one was written for one of my favorite poets that passed away a few years ago, Amiri Baraka, and it's called Portrait in Black. Love is a trance anyway, poised Egyptian queen of the compound accent. The moon is down in the offstage dark, and the demons in tears. Long dead, half under the shade, they lie face down in the long passage. I go full-on spaz, all asides, imperfect pitch, a sutra for hobbling harpsichord, cobwebbed keys thinner than reeds. The amp would cut out at key points in line with my little swayed two-step. The service I provide is a more addictive series. Worn plots are left deep. Hung queens get hanged for the warm red crush. We have to talk in every room to solve the dream house, to consider which poems I will allow to be liared and felt up, perused over shots, blunts in a smoke-stained study. My heart is the most fucked country, a sketched, uneven valley grove of bones. You can only capture the poets and keep them lurking when everyone seems an undercover statuette of eruptions. The lady caps her brandy in wretched, unmistakable silence. And this poem was written using one of Kenneth Koch's writing assignments, and it was really great. It was every stanza was supposed to reflect a different period of your life. And since I hadn't written much about my youth, my childhood, I used that. And it's called Smoke Flowers. I stayed shut up in my room. A red wooden table took up most of it, and tools. A black unlined journal filled my days. The dark of the woods breathing in through the window. My dad's friends and all of their kids asleep everywhere our house would hold them. I moved to my mother's for good at 14. I soon left school for dreams of the lyric, of building. I lied and said the lessons moved too slowly. Caught the ferry back to Seattle, dragging back my bags of books. Alan, Jack, John Wieners. I filled in a few blues songs to form a whole story, couldn't carry it. Marveled at the graveled voice of the devil. Sounded good, on pitch, rich, illiterate. Moved away to study, stretch what little money there was, did not work. I was mostly taught who to read. Robert Duncan, Creeley, Joanne. Burned out on college my third year, suddenly it seemed the golden fleece when I only needed sex. I was driven across country in the manner of a dark prince. Still couldn't write well, only trying. The filters on the words felt waterlogged and stuck. Flew out to San Francisco penniless, left a woman crying face down in the Chelsea. Pulled myself up and lived a year with my bathroom down the hall, no buzzer. Moved down with the sun to a new life, found work. The long leaning tower of nights fell to mesh. I became a warrior, surprised at what I still didn't know. How to get started, move along, stay moving. How to fill the page all over. And this is called Three Landscapes. LA Odyssey. I almost insist on the words as doors left swinging from the force no one saw. A wraparound hotel with empty courtyard, boarded up, sprayed white, hiding out. Nick is too kind, too black and slowly moving marbles against flesh. Sarah, a model of containment. Brian is luminous, all eyes, twin fires beyond the pit that only crackles green. Brighter than the edges of neon lining Fairfax. Family books, the films of Robert Blake. We score a trim ocean blue windbreaker and dinosaurs of the land, sea, and air. I stepped away from the bench when they brought the car around, my black hobo sack abandoned and thought a bomb. I was seamlessly high on my air heels and driven away to where the camera could not follow. Tyler, Texas. Two out-of-towners in the sharp grasses, white churches. Not a hair feels out of place. They say the next county over from Smith is wet. You go around Ben Wheeler, through dumbfuck White House, back over Black Beauty Ravine. Drink till mothers do back at the home for memory care, and a random viewing of East Side, West Side, where Stanwyck and Ava Gardner step into the same picture. Finally alone together, more arrowhead hunting. We are fuses left scorched under lavender skies, where Karen Carpenter's longest note is broken in half. Near dark, I shot what I thought was a long stick and didn't check back for 2 days. It was a water moccasin, head all blown off and caved in, slick as snot. In and around Port Angeles, this is about an hour and a half north of my house in Washington. Crescent was the lake, an air crest, a motel. Mind stuck at my sources. A flimsy strip of rooms, painted, spotless insides. A blossom curled to its drink in the glass jar. Fluid as past saviors and poet explorers. Philip with the shade of Miss Kids. Any rough land rises with light. A peeling red house, rotten wood trim. It felt empty from across the river. I was a giant bent at the waist with massive reach through lines of rain, combing knots from the fog, clear down through the pine. Tiny points of bloody lime ink rejoined every image, meaning light pressed the day long, menacing chord, congested hall of mosses, bump and narrow bridge. I fell out alone and so solid, reciting my crystalline little head off in slick and banded verse. Oh, the air from the valve that burns which glyph. Aquarelle, after Emile Nolde. Bent at my desk in pieces, in starlight's wire clutch, the eye is caught, staring into splinters. like the warble of the dove at the start of rain, and the curve of the cane to follow its script. The lord of the nadir is the black sun, a hot whiskey with anise wash, small circular brush to lash and gather, to be trans, not destroyers. Continuous snowfall recorded, crystals tapping colors out from their centers. My idealized voice, in fact, a ruin. I can't freeze lines together any longer. I need hot flowers, figures ripped loudly from their boxes, rather, off balance, crumbling smoke, losing the light, lifted. And a couple poems for poets that have passed away. This is for John Ashbery. This is called The Balloon is Ascending, for J.A. in memoriam. He was living in America, the same old, setting fire to dry sticks beneath the bath of Rimbaud, nylon cuttings from under the archways of Reverdee. Spirit blue flames like idiots run down the lane after us, reminding me more of our final meeting with the great and powerful. Pay no attention to the man behind the lost wax cast, the archaeologists. He always felt more like an architect, an undercover croupier, imparting our poetic ellipsis out from Governor's Island. His offerings always teeming with other forms, the factory queers, the Triple Crown, the edges of these lacustrine cities catching the light, duh, his signature gleams. I tried to steal how he switches back into deadly commentary and abuse of his own verse. This morning, the staircase behind the arabesque wall opened up. Further tiles were set with maze and minotaur emojis. Pop does not mean empty. More refraction of light in leading the vowels. I dreamed of stumbling on his exquisitely whacked, private-seeming notes, brown pocketbook in oblique erasure, traces of the madrigals asleep, tickled out from underneath. Days when having a holograph cranked by the poet's press felt like printing dollar bills, by any means necessary. Come back tomorrow, and I'll have forms for you. And this is for Joanne Kiker. This was written on her birthday, actually, before she passed away, what turned out to be her last birthday. November 19th, 2016. 1. Poetry is the part that no one sees. Clip the flower, burn the brush, watch rain stream down the moon-viewing window. 6 drops fold together, then glimmer. Burn a stick of autumn leaves, crack the screen door, write longer. Have beams shooting out and over the blessed, bountiful body. Do not revisit poems the next day. They have already rejoined the actual matter, daily music fallen back into the fabric. To acknowledge mastery would violate her flexibility, even further terms, the heat and shape of the mountain. 2. Bring the outside in, the gray continuous tangle of moss posing as a mandala, burning the sudden white tiny cracks in between, outside. This is called Secrets of the Inner Mind. The age of gold cracked me up last night, asters and sparrows to be exact. that unrelenting knot in the choral fire. It's good exercise to get out on stage, to stand in the silvered chamber and deny emptiness. When the pocket falls so deep, one could mark anything out over the top. The India ink drops continuously. Its likeness still Helen as phantom, not the truth of the state of her body, but being awash in a sound uprooted. The desk is still a symbol I pile things on, pin down elegies, illegible dates, introductions scrawled on slender backs of envelopes, receipts, small machine-like cloud chambers, talon disconnected. Sunlight burns my feet, putting away the wet mop, where I am stopped from almost killing myself. All that wobbling of the lens nonsense. I will cling to the truth of the soundtrack tearing through the unveiling. Jean Moreau's scepter coated in dust. A darkness poured from the open door, crowned enameled teeth of Tyrannosaurus Rex. Their portrait is crushed to the point of flowers. Their lines are reaching, arms out from the center. Their lace is torn over the image at points, a flame-like insistence flaring this all up from behind. One piss-driven, lifelike icicle, the diamond district through a downpour, past the lovesick dungeons of Dante, a cleaving after in Sappho. What remains of a dialogue, the small blobbed cellular enclosure, slipping it into strings, letting it wither. No God but the act, creator eternally rested in light. Fears for my life dissolved in the booth, largely unknown fire exit back of the hotel closet door. Satin sheets, Lightfoot thunder, lover impaled outside of that world. Cutting young poets much slack, and the box for the board missing. Remains of the maze, spit out from a star. Plumes from a tea room in Lebanon, New Jersey. Eke out a few more bars for the jewels behind doors. Lutes and harps lay up to bolster language out from underneath. More absent-mindedly walking the room, swishing about beyond argument or caging names, calling out over the whole wet season, commercial speculation, cycles. I love the edge the wall makes, casino game board green. My love comes bursting out the center of the glass, foiled. I abandon my trap in fragments. The Grand Terrace Band, its waning finale of synchronized dives, straight to my deepest forest overnight, this unfinished, uproarious music for vacuum. Man drowning with flowers. A dream is not necessarily assigned one body. The general drift of a day is allowed to form its new surface. Outlined crosses, upper human figures, coiled baskets, bracken fern, a lamp that flares out in my sunken chest. The village is streamlined with collapsible mauve steeples, a point at which the line locks back in refusal, audible. Even his signature, not safe from machine-like violence. Colossal spider sent back up the mountain, tearing out from within. What if the path is still disconnection, dead tendrils unarranged? A pastel overview, even its forest comes interlocked with diamonds. A disease rife with suffocation, descriptions, distant ends of the rusted track. A mask we attach to the screen and watch. The white dots frolic as if they are beyond our control, or at crossroads. Blinding haystacks, man drowning with yellow flowers, pink and red distended organs underneath layers of minerals. No message. A green paper edge to the river, a line of madrone torn back from the sea, wobbling on the rise at cliffside. Arsenal 4. Cinders in clotted smoke, stone of the war and its gleaming. Battle plans reduced to perfection. The floors reappear in silent symphonic gestures. A folded paper calico window, hung with tiger skins, knocking twice at night. Jerusalem red lamps worn more as a garland than her smear turning trampled door, breaking the fall. Scribbles under square jars, giants in long fits in hieroglyphics. The painters weaned on bent reed pens, drilled holes, blood ink of gorgons, violet sample of the sirens, hooked in delay over and under water, approaches replete, faint, bluish gray. And this is another poem for a poet that passed, Tom Clark, who actually lived in North Berkeley and was hit by a car for the second time in a few years and died. This is called Snow Effect, in memory of Tom Clark. In the day, blood, yet we live by night. In the black between splashes, Jesus, I just gave away your beautiful book Air to a poet on his 25th birthday. Only now to hear you have died on that brick racetrack of a street. Of course, I think of Frank and Francoise d'Orléac. You may have already met. North Berkeley feels not unlike Beacon Hill in its way, having absorbed the available institutional darkness. You once told me of how John Wieners loved the Chelsea, whole nights starring Rene Ricard or Harry Fainlight, leading you to secret machines buried in the courtyard. A London life of crumbling my weed right into your bag, right under my eyes. Elastic, flexible, yes, I like breathing better than work. Poor Angelica, she is lovely, as has been noted often throughout our history made of poetry or an actual earth, as Olson once soared above saying, the green lights still burning by the gate. And I'll close with this poem I wrote in Marfa, and I used all the source material to make this poem. And they were all books with titles like Famous Speeches by Native Americans. Another one was called Indian Oratory. There are about 4 or 5 of these books. And I had to read them all to kind of make this poem that only runs like 3 pages. But it was also, there's a quote in here that's important, that sort of started the poem, and it's by Joy Harjo. And she's talking about what is expected of the Native American artist or writer. And she says, not to reverse history, but to draw out the strength. The Prisoner's Song. The third arrow flew upward and stuck. We rode back. Sunbirds bedeviled the great stem, its reflected words. Fast thunder, hills, a molten mass, small clouds of stones, green rushes, waylaid spirits onto lava beds, post removed, stone broken, face turned down to earth. I dropped out the little hangnail blanket of a door, sun strapped to my back, so everyone could feel I was sinking. I dried out, woke up, sprouted wings, and flew away. Looking glass is dead. The circular blue paper is the sky. We see some green spots which are pleasing. Are the commissioners clear as I am? I gave them a blue flag which they pretended to cherish. I live in hopes. I do not have two hearts. The Illinois River will rise, a single warrior to write beyond without me. Death at the hands of the long guns. Did I say death, or the springs are drying up? Find the break where blood runs clear. Through the love you bear your gallant little band. Not to reverse history, but to draw out the strength. Write in the corridor to be no speaking. Sing in the hall to be no dancing. Cry in the street to be no leading. Break into the house to be no sleeping. Feel in the closet to be no running. Fight in the dome to be no screaming. Lie down in the dark to be no changing. Are the commissioners clear as I am? The dampness of night pierces my shield. Two dead men push a stick through my buttonhole. The sun looks down on me as complete. I want you to look and smile, red with iron black. With all of my heart, I thank my black-robed friends for their kindness. Columns of steel rise. I was glad to hear the black robes had given you this shimmer of elongated nights, left to waver in the void. They know how to die in battle. They are a twist in the black mirror, that river between the city and the mist. We will produce no same men again. They come back different and the same. They roam over hills and plains and wish the heavens would fall. You issued the first soldiers, and we only answered back, seeking air. I have sent many words that were drowned along the way. The wind is full of bottles, and the air aggressive. A red feather placed into black hair. Thank you.
Thank you, Noah, for your permanent exchange, and Cedar for bringing so many poets with you in your poems. Please consider the wares, courtesy of Mo's, chat to the poets, and come back next week for Andrea Brady, who rarely reads in the States. She's normally in the UK, so this is a good chance to get her. All right, good night.